They say life changes in a single moment, but no one ever tells you how brutal that moment can be. My name is Alisa, and what I'm about to share is not just my story, it is my survival. I once believed my world was safe. A small home, a loving husband, a little boy who made me smile every morning. I thought happiness, once found, could never be stolen. But destiny doesn't knock before it enters. One ordinary morning, my husband kissed our son and left for work. By evening, strangers knocked on my door with the news that shattered my soul. He was gone forever. I was still young, holding a child who could barely understand what death meant. Hamza's small fingers clutched my dress as he looked up and asked, "Mama, where is Papa?" I had no words, no strength, only silence. In that silence, my life broke into two pieces. Before and after Dot at first, the world pretended to care. Relatives, neighbors, even distant friends filled my home with sympathy and promises. "We're here for you, Alisa. Don't worry," they said. But promises are lighter than air. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and those same voices vanished. They left behind nothing but an empty house, unpaid bills, and a widow with a child clinging to her knees. The money my husband left was gone within months. Hunger crept into our kitchen like an uninvited guest. Rent piled up. I had never worked outside before, but now I had no choice. So I put away my pride and became a maid scrubbing floors, washing dishes, cooking food for others while my own son sometimes went to bed with an empty stomach. But poverty was not the hardest part. The hardest part was the way people looked at me. When you are a young widow, people do not see your grief, they see your body. They do not see your strength, they see your weakness. And worst of all, they do not see a human being, they see an opportunity. The landlord, with his false smile, whispering that there were other ways to pay rent. The men at the houses where I worked, watching too closely when I bent down, brushing their hands against mine as if testing my silence. Even a family friend who once brought groceries looked me in the eye one night and said, "You're still young, Alisa. You need love. I can make you happy again." His kindness had only been a disguise for hunger. Each night I locked my door, pressing Hamza against my chest, his small voice asking why I was crying. How could I tell him? How could I explain that the world had turned me into prey? But what society didn't know was that while they were trying to break me, they were shaping something else, something stronger. My son, Hamza, was watching. Every insult, every unwanted hand, every tear, I thought I was hiding them. But he saw, and in his young heart, a fire began to burn. This is the story of how a widow fought against humiliation, exploitation, and endless nights of fear, and how her son grew up to turn that pain into power when the final prayers for my husband ended and the last guest stepped out of our house. I stood in the silence of an empty room and felt like the walls were closing in on me. The air smelled of burnt incense, but the scent of grief was heavier. My little Hamza clutched at my dress, too young to understand that his father was gone, too innocent to know that his mother's world had collapsed. I remember staring at his face and thinking, how can I keep him safe when I can't even keep myself from falling apart? The first few weeks after his death blurred together. Relatives and neighbors crowded the house, speaking soft words that were supposed to heal me. They told me, "You are not alone, Alisa. We are with you." Their voices filled the rooms with promises. But promises do not cook meals. Promises do not pay rent. And promises do not stop children from crying at night. Slowly, one by one, they stopped coming. The phones went silent. The knocks on the door ceased. And the people who had vowed to stay with me vanished like smoke in the wind. Reality came like a storm. Bills piled up on the table. Rent notices slipped under the door. Groceries disappeared faster than I could afford to replace them. The little money my husband's job had provided as compensation was gone in a few months. Hunger began to visit our kitchen daily. Hamza and I would eat bread with tea and pretend it was enough. Some nights I let him eat while I went hungry, telling him I wasn't feeling well. He was too small to realize that I was lying to protect him. Desperation forced me into a world I had never known before. I had never worked outside my home. My husband had always been the provider, but now survival demanded something different. I swallowed my pride and began working as a maid. My days became endless circles of scrubbing floors, washing dishes, and cleaning other people's homes while my own fell into disrepair. My hands, once soft, grew rough with soap and chemicals. My back ached, my feet blistered, but the greatest wound was invisible. The wound of humiliation. At first, I thought the worst part would be poverty. I was wrong. Poverty may starve your stomach, but society starves your dignity. People no longer looked at me as Alisa, the wife, the mother, the human being. To them, I was simply a young widow. And in their eyes, that label carried only one meaning: weakness. The first time I noticed it was with my landlord. He came to collect rent one evening. His eyes did not stay on the money I handed him. They scanned me from head to toe in a way that made my skin crawl. His smile was not the smile of sympathy. It was the smile of a wolf that had spotted prey. He leaned closer, his breath heavy, and said, "Alisa, you are too young to live alone. You need a man to take care of you." His words sliced through me. That night, when I couldn't pay the full rent, he whispered in a voice that made my blood run cold, "There are other ways to pay." I shut the door in his face and pressed my trembling body against it, holding Hamza close as though my child's tiny arms could shield me from the cruelty of the world. That night, I did not sleep. Even inside my own house, I no longer felt safe, but the landlord was not the only one. In the homes where I worked, men began to treat me the same way. Their eyes lingered when I bent to clean. Their words were dipped in poison disguised as compliments. One day, as I was washing dishes, a man brushed his hand against mine and said with a smile, "You work too hard. Alisa, you must get lonely at night." His voice carried a meaning that made me choke on my own breath. Lonely? Did they think loneliness was an invitation? Did they think my silence was consent? Every day I came home with my body aching and my spirit crushed. And every night I held Hamza close, praying he would never see the shadows that followed me. But children see more than we realize. Sometimes I caught him watching me with worried eyes, as though he knew his mother was fighting battles she could not speak of. Even family friends were no different. A relative who often visited me after my husband's death pretended to care. He brought groceries, asked about Hamza, and spoke kindly. For a moment, I believed he was genuine. But kindness, too, can be a mask. One night, his words changed. He looked at me and said, "You are still young, Alisa. You need love. I can make you happy again." My heart froze. When his hand reached for mine, I pulled away and told him to leave. His face twisted with anger. He spat out, "Don't act innocent. Without me, how will you survive?" That night, I locked the door and cried silently, Hamza's small hands wiping away tears he didn't understand. Days turned into months. My routine became mechanical. Wake up, prepare Hamza for school, work in 3 different houses until evening, come home exhausted, then do it all again. My body grew weaker, but my spirit refused to die. I was not living for myself anymore. I was living for Hamza, yet no matter how much I tried to shield him, he saw the truth. He saw the landlord's unwanted stares. He heard the whispers of neighbors. He noticed the cruel laughter of men on the streets. Even at his young age, he knew his mother's world was unsafe. Sometimes, when I returned home late, he would run to me, holding my hand tightly and saying, "Mama, Don't worry. I will grow up and take care of you. His innocent words were both my strength and my sorrow. Strength because they reminded me I wasn't alone. Sorrow because no child should have to carry such a heavy promise, but Hamza was not an ordinary child. Life had stolen his childhood too soon. While other children played, he watched me suffer. While they laughed, he studied. While they enjoyed, he carried responsibility. I could see in his eyes that he was already becoming the man his father never had the chance to be. Still, society's cruelty never stopped. Once, while walking home with Hamza, a group of young men followed us, shouting dirty jokes into the night. My heart pounded as I gripped his hand and walked faster. He was only 8 years old then, but even he understood. He pulled my hand firmly and whispered, "Don't be scared. Mama, I'm here." His words were small, but they carried a strength that kept me from breaking apart. Every insult, every stare, every unwanted word was shaping both of us. It was breaking me, but it was forging him. I realized that while society was trying to bury me in shame, it was unknowingly sharpening my son into steel dot by the time Hamza reached his teenage years. His discipline and determination shone brighter than anything I had ever seen. He studied late into the night, worked harder than anyone in his class, and saved every coin I gave him instead of spending it. Sometimes he stayed hungry so I could eat. Once, when my shoes broke, he surprised me with a new pair bought from his saved allowance. I cried that night, not because of poverty, but because of the love of a child who was already becoming my protector. The world saw me as weak, but my son saw me as strong. And slowly, his strength became my own dot. As Hamza grew older, I noticed a change in his eyes. They no longer belonged to a child. They carried the weight of someone who had seen too much, too soon. While other boys of his age laughed loudly, carefree and playful, my son carried a quiet seriousness. Life had taught him lessons that children should never learn, but instead of breaking him, it sharpened him dot by the time he entered high school. Hamza was already more mature than many grown men I had known. His teachers admired his discipline, his determination, his hunger to learn. He did not just study, he studied with a purpose, a fire that no one could extinguish. I remember his teacher, Mr. Farhan, once telling me after school, "Your son is not just intelligent, Alisa. He is special. He has the power to change lives, starting with yours." Those words sank deep into my heart. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope flicker within me, but life was not ready to release us from its trials. The more Hamza grew, the more the world tried to crush us. Poverty still sat heavily in our home. My work as a maid kept food on the table, but barely. There were days when I returned home with blistered hands, so exhausted I could hardly stand, only to find Hamza waiting with a warm meal he had cooked himself. Sometimes he sewed his own buttons back onto his shirts, so I would not have to strain my eyes at night. He was my son, but often he felt more like my protector. Still, society did not stop hunting me. One afternoon, I was scrubbing the floor of a wealthy man's house when I felt a shadow fall across me. I froze. The owner, a middle-aged man with eyes that carried arrogance instead of kindness, stood there. His words were coated in honey, but they dripped with poison. "Alisa," he said softly, "why do you work so hard? If you were mine, you wouldn't need to lift a finger." Before I could react, his hand touched my shoulder. My stomach twisted. My body trembled. I pushed his hand away and whispered, "Please respect yourself and me." He smirked, unfazed. "Respect?" he said coldly. "Respect doesn't fill your stomach. Think about it." I left that house shaking, the mop still dripping in my hand. When I returned home, Hamza noticed my red eyes. He did not ask questions, but later that night, I heard him whisper to himself, "One day, Mama, I'll make them regret it." It was then I realized something important. While the world was trying to crush me, it was shaping him into steel. Every cruel word, every unwanted touch, every humiliation I endured, it was not just my burden. It was becoming his fuel. Hamza began finding small ways to ease my suffering. He tutored younger children after school, earning a few coins here and there. But instead of keeping the money for himself, he would press it into my hand with a smile and say, "Mama, buy something for yourself." He never bought toys, never wasted money on games or sweets like other boys. Instead, he saved it, planned with it, and always thought of me first. Sometimes, when exhaustion weighed heavily on me, I would find him already preparing dinner or sweeping the floor. "Mama, rest," he would say. "I'll handle it." His words, though simple, carried a strength that made my heart ache with pride and sorrow at the same time. Pride because my son was becoming extraordinary. Sorrow because life had forced him to grow up too quickly, but Hamza never complained. He carried his responsibilities like armor. At school, he became known not only for his intelligence, but also for his discipline. He studied late into the night, often falling asleep with books still open in his lap. He dreamed bigger than our small house, bigger than the pain we lived in. By the time he was 16, Hamza had become the light of my life. But even then, I could not escape the darkness of others. On the streets, men still hurled cruel jokes at me. Some relatives still whispered behind my back, saying a woman could not survive without a man unless she had secret help. Their words cut deep, but I never let Hamza see how much they wounded me. Yet he always knew. He always noticed. One evening, as I returned from work, I found him waiting outside the house. His face was serious, his eyes burning with determination. "Mama," he said, "I'll never let anyone hurt you again. One day, I'll become strong enough to protect you forever." His words broke me and healed me at the same time. I smiled through tears, wondering how a boy could carry such heavy promises. But Hamza was no ordinary boy. He started setting goals for himself. He worked harder in school, determined to win scholarships. He knew that education was his way out, not just for himself, but for both of us. Every grade he earned, every praise he received from his teachers, became a step closer to lifting us out of the darkness we had lived in for so long. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was silent, I would sit beside him as he studied. His face glowed in the dim light of a single bulb. I would stroke his hair and whisper, "Hamza, you don't need to do all this for me. Just live your life." And he would look at me with those burning eyes and say, "Mama, my life is nothing without you. If you suffered for me, I'll fight for you." His determination terrified me at times. I feared the weight of the world would crush him, but deep down, I knew something else. Hamza was not just surviving, he was preparing. Preparing to break the chains of poverty. Preparing to silence the voices of those who mocked us. Preparing to stand tall in a society that had tried to push us down. By the time he was 17. Hamza had earned the respect of his entire school. His teachers often told me that he was destined for greatness. When he finally won a scholarship to study abroad, the letter trembled in my hands as I read it. My tears fell onto the paper, but they were no longer tears of pain. They were tears of hope. Hamza hugged me tightly and whispered, "Mama, your struggle ends here. I promise." That night, as I lay awake, I thought about the long road we had walked together. From hunger to humiliation, from fear to fire, every step had been carved into our souls. And now, my son was ready to carry me into a new future. The day Hamza left for the airport, my heart carried 1,000 storms. I had prayed for this opportunity, begged for a better future for him. Yet when the time came to let him go, I felt as if I were losing a part of myself. He hugged me tightly, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Mama, you've been both mother and father to me. You never gave up, even when the world turned against you. Now let me fight for you. As I watched him disappear into the crowd of travelers, I felt both empty and full. Empty because my son, my only companion in this cruel world, was leaving me. Full because he was stepping into the future that I had always dreamed of for him. That night, the silence in our house was louder than ever before. For years, Hamza had been my shadow, my comfort, my strength. Without him, even the ticking of the clock felt heavy dot, but just weeks later, my phone rang. His voice came through, full of excitement. Mama, I found a part-time job. I'll send money home every month. And he kept his word. For the first time in years, I felt relief wash over me. I no longer had to beg landlords for mercy, no longer had to return home with my hands cracked and bleeding from endless cleaning. Slowly, our home began to change. A small sofa replaced the broken chairs. Our kitchen filled with food. Clothes hung neatly in the cupboard instead of being patched and worn thin. Each coin he sent was not just money, it was dignity. Hamza's life abroad was not easy, but he never complained. He worked late nights, studied harder than anyone, and sent more than half of what he earned back home. He often told me, Mama, I don't want you to work anymore. You've carried enough pain. Now let me carry it. His words were the balm that healed years of wounds, years past. Hamza excelled in his studies, earning awards and recognition. His professors praised him not only for his intelligence, but also for his discipline and humility. When he finally graduated with honors, he called me with tears in his voice. Mama, we did it. Everything you sacrificed was not in vain. I cried that night, but for once, my tears tasted of joy instead of sorrow. The day he returned home will forever be etched in my memory. He was no longer the little boy I had once held in my arms. He was tall, confident, and strong. In his hand, he carried a job contract with a salary I had never dared to imagine. As he stepped into our small house, relatives who had long abandoned us suddenly reappeared, their faces full of fake smiles and congratulations. They praised him, pretended they had always cared. But Hamza ignored them. His eyes searched only for me. He pulled me into his arms and whispered, Mama, we made it. This house is yours. Your tears are finished. At that moment, the weight of years lifted from my chest. All the humiliation, the unwanted hands, the cruel laughter, the hunger, the loneliness, it all faded like a nightmare at dawn. Society had tried to break me with poverty, with shame, with whispers meant to crush my spirit. But it failed. Why? Because love, pure, uncheckable love between a mother and her son, was stronger than all of it. Hamza did not just give me comfort. He gave me back my dignity. He reminded me that widows are not weak. They are survivors. We are mothers, sisters, daughters, human beings who deserve respect. Not exploitation, Dot, as I looked at my son standing proud and tall. I realized something even deeper. Sometimes the greatest strength does not come from outsiders. Not from neighbors, not from relatives, not even from society. It comes from within the walls of your own home. It comes from the children you raise with sacrifice and love. Hamza's journey was proof of that. Every cruel stare, every insult, every struggle we endured had forged him into a man of steel. He turned my tears into fuel, my suffering into his determination. And in the end, he rebuilt our lives piece by piece. Today, when I look back, I no longer feel only pain. I feel gratitude. Gratitude that I had the strength to endure. Gratitude that my son grew into the man his father could not live long enough to be. Gratitude that our story, once filled with darkness, became a story of light, Dot. So if you are listening to this now, remember this. Never underestimate the power of love and sacrifice. The world may try to break you. People may abandon you. Whispers may try to shame you, but if you hold on, if you fight for those you love, the same struggles meant to destroy you can become the very fire that shapes your future, and that is my story. The story of a widow the world tried to silence, and the sun who rose from her tears to give her back her voice.